with Sam Seder.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Monday, May 24th, 2021. My name is Sam Seder. This is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, senior fellow at Demos, the chair of the board at Color of Change, the author of The Sum of Us, What Racism Costs Everyone and How We Can Prosper Together. Heather McGhee will be here with us. Also on the program today, world leaders express outrage over Belarusian opposition figure seized as the Russian-backed Lushenko stages a fake bomb scare. UN aid now allowed in Gaza by Israel amidst COVID fears. In Gaza, they have completely limited testing and only 2% vaccination rate. Meanwhile, in this country, COVID at its lowest level since last June, and nearly 50% of our population has at least one shot. Biden administration extends temporary protection status for over 150,000 Haitians by 18 months. Democrats seem to be prepping reconciliation for the infrastructure bill. Joe Biden's budget, however, drops any mention of public option or those cuts to prescription drug prices. Wall Street Journal report that the U.S. intelligence has intelligence on ill researchers in Wuhan, adding to calls for a probe on COVID's origins. Tomorrow, Joe Biden will host the Floyd family on the one-year anniversary of the killing of George Floyd. But he'll have no police reform legislation to sign. Matt Gaetz' ex-girlfriend is cooperating with the feds. That's going to be a drag for him. And in the wake of revelations of an unauthorized intelligence unit in the Postal Service, the Washington Post reports on another one in the Commerce Department. All this and more on today's Majority Report. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for joining us. The beginning of the week. Let me just start off by saying my voice is gone for some reason. I'm pretty sure it's allergies. It's there's so much pollen in the air that I'm literally, I think, like chewing on it.
Yeah.
It's not even an allergic reaction, right? It's like literally, it's you're breathing it in.
It's particularly rough. I mean, I've been waking up in the middle of the night coughing, which I just like, I don't even smoke or anything like that. And it's the pollen.
It's the pollen. And now, of course, I wanted to continue to wear my mask outside, but I was afraid of getting beat up by Tucker Carlson fans. So,
yeah.
So now I'm just chewing on the pollen. Joining me, as always, Emma Vigeland, who has apparently the same issues with pollen that I do, but just not as extensive.
Yeah, I mean, it was a twin waking up of coughing and then just screaming at the top of my lungs. Trae Young flopped. Trae Young flopped.
That's a sporting game.
The Knicks lost their first playoff game in 8 seasons by 2 points last night. Yes.
Well, sorry to hear that.
Yep.
Sorry to hear that. Wasn't quite sure where you were going with that, to be honest.
I mean, I told you before the show, but
Yeah, I don't think I understood it then either.
you lost 2 baseball games this weekend. So
That is true. I mean,
personally,
yes. Well, I mean, I was assistant coach. My son, it was tough. It was a tough weekend. With that said, this is, I don't know, is this a cautionary tale for folks who were pedestaling Liz Cheney, this champion of democracy? She was so concerned about democracy because of the big lie. Understand, I mean, this is generally true for politicians, but for someone like Liz Cheney, it really should go without saying, which is Liz Cheney is doing what Liz Cheney thinks is best for Liz Cheney. And Liz Cheney's agenda is not one that you could possibly share unless you are a deeply, deeply conservative, and I think in some instances, completely unconcerned with the idea of forever wars and denying essentially as many people as possible the benefits of society. I really don't know how else to articulate that in a polite manner. Here's Liz Cheney on with Jonathan Swan on Axios's HBO. It is impossible to say what she's saying and genuinely believe it.
You don't see any linkage between Donald Trump saying the election's stolen and then Republicans in all of these state legislatures rushing to put in place these restrictive voter laws?
Well, I think you have to look at the specifics of each one of those efforts. I think if you look at the Georgia laws, for example, there's been a lot that's been said nationally about the Georgia voter laws that turns out not to be true.
But even the Republican Lieutenant Governor of Georgia, Jeff Duncan, said that there was, when this bill started to pick up momentum was when Rudy Giuliani was testifying that the Georgia election was a sham. I don't think anyone doubts that the reason 400-some voting bills have been introduced, 90% by Republicans, supported by the Republican National Committee. I don't think it's a coincidence after the election that this has happened.
Look, I think everybody should want a situation and a system where people who ought to be able to vote and have the right to vote can vote, and people who, don't, shouldn't. And again, I come back to things like
But what problem
voter
are they
ID.
solving for? Like, there's
Well,
what
look,
are all these states doing?
No, I think, each state is different.
What was the big problem in Georgia that needed to be solved by a new law? What was the big problem in Texas? What was the big problem in Florida? These laws are coming all around the states, and what are they solving for?
I think you've got to look at each individual state law. But I think what we can all agree on...
You can't divorce them from the context.
Well,
come on.
yeah, but I think what we can agree on is that what is happening right now is really dangerous.
And I can agree with that.
When I think about 2000, think about sitting on the inaugural platform in January of 2001.
Pivot.
Watching Al Gore. Of course, we had won. I'm sure he didn't think he had lost. Mm-hmm. We had fought this politically very, very intense battle, and he conceded. He did the right thing for this nation. And that is one of the big differences between that and what we're dealing with now, and the danger of Donald Trump today.
The false equivalence. Go Sam.
If it wasn't for how much the pollen has taken out of me, I can't even tell you how outrageous what she has just said. I mean, we can work backwards. First off, she probably just coincidentally reminded everybody that when you want to look to the closest analog in recent history as to what happened on January 6th, right, which is where she is in a rehabilitation project, you need only look to West Palm Beach, Florida, 20 years prior, when the operatives that the Bush-Cheney team sent to Florida to stage a mini riot to prevent the people who are counting the ballots in West Palm Beach to go forward. If you want to look for the model for what we saw on January 6th at the Capitol in 2021, all you need to do is go down to 2000 in Florida in November.
They were screaming, "Stop the steal." It was the same people. It was Roger Stone behind that same propaganda project, just like he was in 2020.
Exactly. And then on top of this, how absolutely embarrassed do you need to be when Jonathan Swan, who really needs the access to these type of people, right? I mean, to do his job, is laughing in your face repeatedly at your complete refusal to acknowledge that the Republicans are basically engaged in a huge voter disenfranchisement project that is solely and totally inspired by Donald Trump pretending that the election was stolen. I mean, he gives her 3 states and she said, well, you got to look at each state in context. All right. So what about Georgia? Well, I mean, look, Liz Cheney, as wretched as you may think that everyone supporting Donald Trump is, Liz Cheney is the same, except for that one issue, which is solely a function of her trying to brand herself as the Pepsi to Donald Trump's Coke. They're both colas, folks. It's just that they're just trying to wrap themselves in a slightly different veneer. And so, people need to really be careful when they lift up voices like Liz Cheney's, because now what's going to happen is when folks complain about those election laws, other folks are going to cite Liz Cheney, who's no fan of Donald Trump's. They're going to say she doesn't see that there's a problem with these laws either. I mean, that's the way it works.
Yeah. I mean, as Swan was laughing about, there is a complete schism in her logic. That you can't say that Donald Trump was lying about the election being stolen and support all the laws that are meant to prevent what Donald Trump claimed were the factors that led to the election being stolen, because it's just such shaky logic. So that's why Swan's laughing there. And she did say something like, people who should vote should, and people who shouldn't be able to vote shouldn't. That's what they're trying to prevent. What does that mean necessarily? He should have pressed her on it. What does that necessarily mean? The reality is they're trying to make it so that people who have the ability to take off work, people who are wealthy, people who are white, those are the shoulds. And the shouldn'ts, well, say you work 3 minimum wage jobs, you can't take the time to stand in a 5-hour line in Atlanta. Sorry, no votes for you.
I mean, that would have been the question for him to ask, because what is her answer? Well, she's got to say, well, people who aren't legal to vote. Well, what proof do you have that there were people who are not legal to vote voted?
Then you're just backing Trump's premise. And then there's no difference at all, except for exactly as you say, the cola branding.
All right, we're going to take a quick break. That was not to denigrate colas, I should say.
I will denigrate colas.
We're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back with Heather McGhee after this. Folks, choosing the right charity can mean the difference between saving a life or not. It can also mean about just making sure that your efforts are being optimized, essentially. For me, the way that I have been finding my charities, I actually, to be honest with you, like there's really 2 different ways I find my charities. One is someone I trust, who's been working with a specific charity. And then the other way is some entity I trust who has been doing massive research on these charities, and that is GiveWell. GiveWell recommends charities that have rigorous academic independent studies of the effectiveness of their program. Since 2010, GiveWell.org has helped over 50,000 donors find the places where their donations can save or improve lives the most. Here's how they do it. GiveWell dedicates over 20,000 hours a year to researching charitable organizations. They handpick a few of the highest impact, evidence-backed charities. Donors have used GiveWell to donate more than $75 million over that time. These donations are going to save over 75,000 lives and improve the lives of millions more. And here's the best part. GiveWell is totally free. GiveWell doesn't even take a cut of your donation. They allocate your tax-deductible donation to the charities you choose. Plus, they publish all of their research on their site. They do so for free so that donors can understand their work. They're totally transparent. They understand their recommendations. For me, I found Give Directly. I don't think it's related to GiveWell, but Give Directly through GiveWell. They essentially just do what that says. You donate money, and they give it directly to people in desperate need, because study after study after study has shown that the best way to raise people out of extreme poverty, and poverty for that matter, is to give them money. And they know best how to spend it and help maintain and keep themselves out of desperate times. But they have other charities there that you may find more appealing, but all of them are rated based upon their efficacy. And all of the work that GiveWell has done is completely transparent. You can see it on their site. If you've never donated to GiveWell's recommended charities before, you can have your donation matched up to $1,000 before the end of June, or as long as their matching funds last. Just go to givewell.org/majority, pick podcast and the Majority Report at checkout, and they will match your funds up to $1,000. That's givewell.org/majority. Make sure to select podcast and the Majority Report at checkout to get your donation matched. I wonder if like these Hello Tushy guys write this stuff just to see if they can make me blush at any given point. But folks, many of us, obviously, COVID is, we're, hopefully on the right path. Things are looking good. Still, many of us scarred by the runs on toilet paper from early COVID. That is when I, on the advice of Kyle, signed up for a Hello Tushy bidet, and I've never looked back. See, there's a little bit of a pun. Hello Tushy's brand new 3.0 is a modern bidet attachment that is here, that is so easy to attach. You will, and it is frankly far less expensive than I think people assume. It is a great way to assess whether a bidet is right for you. It's stylish, it's eco-friendly, it's easy to install. It even saves you cheap ass money, as they say. Hello Tushy 3.0 doesn't just clean your butt with a precise stream of fresh water. It cleans itself. Has the smart spray automatic nozzle. It attaches to your existing toilet. Like I say, you don't have to have extra, you don't have to have any electricity. You don't need any extra plumbing. You cut your toilet paper use by 80%. All you need to be able to know how to do is basically turn a wrench and those screws for the toilet seat. Super easy. Plus, Hello Tushy has you covered with a 60-day risk-free guarantee, a 12-month warranty. You can join millions of happy Hello Tushy customers right now. Clean your butt with every flush. Go to hellotushy.com/majority for 10% off plus free shipping. This is a special offer for the Majority Report listeners. Go to hellotushy.com/majority for 10% off. hellotushy.com/majority. And lastly, wouldn't it be nice if you had a pocket-sized guide to help you sleep, or to focus, or to just be better, feel better in the world? Well, there is. And if you have 10 minutes, Headspace can change your life. Headspace is your daily dose of mindfulness in the form of guided meditations in an easy-to-use app. It is one of the only meditation apps advancing in the field of mindfulness and meditation through clinically validated research. There are 25 published studies on Headspace benefits, 600,000 5-star reviews, over 60 million downloads. Need some help falling asleep? If you're feeling a little overwhelmed, I don't know, having just like trying to get calm, reintegrating into our post-COVID world, Headspace has wind down sessions and 3-minute SOS meditations. There are even meditations for kids. It's been very helpful for my daughter, actually. Headspace works on your schedule, anytime, anywhere. I'm trying to get more into it. I'm trying to remember to do it when I can't fall asleep well. But also I've been, I'll do some meditations when I'm taking a walk. I always got to dual purpose things, as you know, folks. But Headspace makes it super easy to use. Like they say, there are 25 published studies on Headspace's benefits. Specifically, you deserve to feel happier. You deserve to feel more relaxed. Headspace is meditation made simple. Go to headspace.com/majority. That's headspace.com/majority for a free 1-month trial with access to Headspace full library of meditations for every situation. This is the best deal available right now. Head to headspace.com/majority today. Okay, do we have Heather? Want to welcome back to the program Heather McGhee. She's a senior fellow at Demos. She's the chair of the board of Color Change and the author of her latest, The Sum of Us, What Racism Costs Everyone and How We Can Prosper Together. Heather, welcome back to the program. I'm here with Emma Vigeland.
Hey, Sam and Emma, nice to be with you.
Thanks for being here.
So let's start with the pools, because that is the metaphor that describes your book, I think, most easily. But let's start with the pools, because this was a story I wasn't aware of, and it really does explain the concept here.
Yeah, I set out to write The Sum of Us really to figure out what happened to the country that had invented the greatest middle class the world had ever seen, and then really walked away from that formula in the 70s, 80s, and through to today, and replaced it with massive record inequality. And I understood the how, right? The tax changes, the labor market changes, et cetera, but I didn't understand the why, right? Why would we have done this to ourselves? And the story of what happened to America's nearly 2,000 mostly segregated public pools in America helped unlock a little bit of that mystery for me. And basically the story is that as part of the New Deal ethos, we built these grand, lavish, but public pools, and many of them were segregated. And when in the civil rights movement, Black families, sued to integrate them, a lot of towns, not just in the Jim Crow South, decided to drain their public pools rather than integrate them. Moved from a public good to a private luxury. So, rich families could have their backyard pools and their, swim clubs. But that really, for me, became a metaphor, the drained pool politics that has been an anti-government, pro-market politics that has had racial resentment and a sort of demonization of public goods once you have to share them with public that you don't believe to be good, as its sort of animating logic, which ultimately has hurt white people economically as well.
Oh, we lost Sam there. So I think that's such an incredible analogy, I guess, or way to a prism to look at your book through. Can you just take us through, some of the social programs where essentially white people were kind of coerced into cutting off their nose to spite their face, essentially, or were convinced that cutting the social safety net was more advantageous than allowing Black people into it.
Yeah, in my book, I have a few pages dedicated to all the free stuff that the government gave to white families in the early 20th century as a way to build the middle class, and how much of that was racially exclusionary, like the pools. And when the party that was the party of the New Deal then said, we're going to be the party of civil rights as well, the majority of white voters stopped voting for Democrats and their, expansive economic agenda. Lyndon Johnson, after signing the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act, would be the last Democrat to win the majority of the white vote. I use the drain pool politics metaphor to talk about what happened to free college, right? Government used to pick up the tab for the cost of college at the state and federal levels. And as the college-going population became more diverse, we had this erosion of public support for generous state funding. There was always room for tax cuts at the state level, always room for more spending on jails and prisons. But the idea of really funding the youth really fell out of favor with more conservative lawmakers and more conservative leaning white voters. And so now we have replaced free college with this debt for diploma system. And that's another instance where white and Black and brown families are suffering as well. Always, as my book takes pains to make clear, it's always worse for Black families and brown families, right? All these economic impacts of racism, but we can't pretend like, the world is really zero sum and you can have profit on one side and loss on the other, for so long.
Sorry about that. I dropped off for just a moment. I want to go back to Hinton Rowan Helper, the fascinating figure, both, I guess, pre and post-war Civil War. But let's talk about him pre-Civil War, and then I want to talk about him in terms of Reconstruction.
So Hinton Rowan Helper is someone whose book I came across in the research for the book. Basically, he was a racist white Southerner who wrote a book that was very influential in abolitionist circles leading up to the Civil War, which made the painstaking case that slavery had impoverished the white South. And I talk about it in the book in terms of the ways in which the kind of plantation class, people who are very wealthy through an exploitative economic system, don't really need to fund public goods. They don't need a middle class, right? They don't need things outside of the closed system. And that impoverished the South. And that was the point that Hinton Rowan Helper was making about slavery. And then, of course, you can see sort of parallels to that with today's, not plantation oligarchy, but it's a similar ethos, this idea we don't need public goods. And ultimately, they're going to shortchange all that we hold in common in a way that hurts everyone.
Yeah, I mean, he pointed to the lack, he was comparing essentially what kind of services, I think it was in the context of libraries, if I remember correctly.
Libraries, roads, schools, yep.
That existed in the North as opposed to the South. And then, of course, come Reconstruction, he's none too happy about the what happens there, because despite the fact that he didn't like slavery, he also very much did not like Black people having power. So, I mean, how does we see a parallel too with voting, right? At that point, when we get into the Reconstruction era, we see, I mean, not too dissimilar to what we're seeing today, but we see the Supreme Court essentially allow for targeted restrictions on votings that were meant to exclude Black people, but also excluded poor white people. And these same plantation owners and frankly, just the elite had not too much of a problem with that either.
No, that was the goal, right? I mean, basically, the point of the Sum of Us is to say that racism in our politics and our policymaking has always been a tool of the narrow, self-interested elite in order to convince the majority of white people to side with their color instead of their class, and to cleave the working class in half and make it impossible for the majority of the country to win the kinds of to take back power from the wealthy and the powerful. And so the attacks that happened, in the sort of first waves of voter suppression after the 15th Amendment, created universal male suffrage, were really aimed at attacking these rising populist fusion parties that were happening all over the South, where you had, landless Black and white folks coming together to take on the big, sort of robber barons at the time, or who would become the robber barons, the big money elite. And so the goal was put together poll taxes, enforced by violence and intimidation at the polls. And in those poll tax states, you had extremely low voter turnout of Black and white folks. And that's kind of a point that I try to make about today. Obviously, when we talk about voter suppression bills, they surgically target Black voters, and yet, it sweeps in lots of women, lots of young people, lots of working class white folks who are less likely to have a photo ID. And that's the way they like it, right? They want a sclerotic democracy with a lot of voter participation. And so that the rules can continue to be rigged in the back rooms. That's the vision. They don't care if working class Republicans don't vote as long as they stay in power.
I want to tease out this zero sum thing, because why do you think? Well, let's start with the zero sum formulation that you make in the book, because zero sum has come up on this program quite a bit over the past couple of years, particularly in the sort of the Trump era, and maybe more in what that concept of the psychological wage of whiteness, but talk about how the fallacy that you see in the zero sum in the context of your book.
Well, that was really one of the first kind of light bulb aha moments for me, was a bunch of sociological research showing that white people increasingly see race as a zero sum competition that they are losing. And so anything that could help Black people is something that they will, many white folks will really organize against, even if it could also help them, because there's a sense that, there's only one ladder. There's only one rung on that ladder, and it's either going to be you or me, right? Profit on one side, loss on the other. Any gain for people of color has to come at white folks' expense. And that's really the formulation that has been used by the elites to divide and distract. And so you start to get, you see it today in our current politics, right? You see it with the right wing's reaction to what is an enormously popular agenda from the Biden-Harris administration, which is to divide, right? To make the takeaways be the slim pieces of racially targeted help, like for Black farmers, for example, who, because they don't want us to know our history, they assume that nobody will know how violently racist and exclusionary the USDA has been throughout its history, and denying Black farmers any kind of access to government benefits. And so we'll finally get a little bit of repair from that harm. And in a bill, the American Rescue Plan, that had something for virtually every family in America, that's what they lead with, right? This is all just a big giveaway to Black people, right? To get that racial resentment up and to make white voters reject what could be a generation changing, what I call a refilling of the public pool with the American Jobs Plan, the American Families Plan. This is massive relief to working and middle class families of all races. And yet they want to talk about Dr. Seuss, they want to talk about cancel culture, they want to gin up that racial resentment so that white voters will see it through a zero sum.
I feel like there's a little bit of aiding and abetting of this zero sum phenomenon in discourse on the left as well, right? Where it's like, is it class? Is it the economy? Or is it racism that's driving like the right wing in this way? I feel like, intersectionality is a word that isn't used enough, but I mean, like, can you talk about a little bit about how we could view this struggle on the left in a more constructive way, as opposed to just treating it as a zero sum game, even just implicitly in our discourse about it?
Right. Well, this is that question and that challenge is something that animated Ian Haney-Lopez out of Berkeley University and University of California, Berkeley, and Anat Shenker-Osorio and I to design a project which we called the Race Class Narrative a number of years ago, that's still living in many formations, including an organization called We Make the Future and Ian's Race Class Academy. It's this idea of, okay, so if you're trying to pull together a multiracial coalition to deal with rising inequality, but that has to tend to racial justice as well, what's the story, right? Well, what is the story that you tell so that you're not privileging one or the other? And what we determined was that a message that can beat both Trumpism and a colorblind economic populism that ignores race is not one that only talks about race in terms of disparities, but rather one that talks about race in terms of the way that the plutocrats use it to divide us, the way that race is actually a tool of the greedy few. And so you're both getting a populist message in there that talks about the rigging of the rules, and you are not being silent on the massive animating force in most people's lives, which is their identity, and the most potent tool of the right? So if you only give a sort of colorblind Sanders message, somebody can nod and agree, and then they walk out and they hear Fox News and Trump and all of that, and they don't know what to do with that. They don't know what to do with the pointing the finger at Black and brown folks. Is it right? Is it accurate? Certainly seems easier than taking on the powerful to like kick my struggling neighbor, and to make myself feel better for feeling better than people who are struggling. And so what the race class message does is it helps to inoculate people against the dog whistles. And because it says that's what the elite does, is that they point the finger at brown and Black families, at new Americans, at immigrants. And so the next time you hear that, you're a little bit smarter about what's happening. And so I am endlessly frustrated by kind of what I think is a really stupid debate where some leftists want to say, race hurts us, right? Talking about race hurts us. And it's like, well, then talk about it smarter, because there's no such thing as not talking about it. There's no such thing as not communicating about it, right? Because people are hearing it all the time.
Right.
If you're silent on it, you're just not fighting on the terrain that, frankly, we've been losing on for so long with white voters.
So, okay. So would it, and so, I hear that, and I think we actually had, Ian Haney on, Lopez on, specifically for the project some time ago.
Yeah, he wrote a great book called Merge Left, so it might've been that, yeah.
And so if it is the case that, and I guess it is zero sum insofar as that if we really include the sort of the plutocrat, or however you want to call it, the capitalist class on some level, right? Somebody's going to have to give up some of the goods.
Yes,
you're not.
It's not zero sum as between people who are currently struggling. Yes, the wealthy are going to have to give something up, right? But I'm sure they'll figure out a way to be okay.
I'm sure. I have no doubt. But so. On one hand, it's a messaging issue, right? Insofar as like understanding the way that race has been leveraged as a way of preventing or obscuring this dynamic where you have plutocrats, oligarchs who are hoarding the wealth on some level, and in terms of like a cause and effect, right? Like, is this, when we say like, you cite the Great Compression, which is that period between the 50s and the 60s when we had a broadened middle class, or at least a broadened white middle class in this country. And government programs that everybody was fine with. And I think there's plenty of, I can't remember who out of Princeton did the research that showed that, like, as soon as it was opened up to Black people, all of a sudden there was a problem with it. But what if this is a question of capitalism, just period, in terms of like, and that Great Compression, like Piketty argues, was sort of, that was the anomaly. And that in this system, even if it happens to be race that is used in this context. I mean, does race have a unique ability, I guess what I'm asking, to be leveraged to make a capitalist system even more capitalistic? Or I mean, do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I'm trying to get at, like, are we, is the racism, which is just being used here, obscuring the problem with capitalism, and is the idea that sequencing, you deal with these issues of race and then you deal with the issues of capitalism?
No, it's that lowering racist, inoculating white voters against racial dog whistles and against, self-defeating divide and conquer tendencies will help build the coalition to take on concentrated wealth and power under capitalism. That's what I'm saying. is that it's not like you deal with the race issues over here as like qua race issues. And I'm not saying that, everybody has to be less, we have to solve racism in order to make any progress. But what I am saying is that we need, we do need in our politics and in our organizing for families to understand that we're pretty much the same, right? That when it all comes down to it, we are all animated by the same needs and desires to live a decent life, to have our basic needs met, to have a shot at fulfilling our dreams, and that the racial stereotypes that are so endemic to our politics are what cut off human empathy and therefore solidarity. And I talk in the book about how there are all these dividends that we can unlock, solidarity dividends, if we can come together across lines of race to do things that we know are in our mutual self-interest.
To the extent that it's not a zero sum once you deal with the plutocrats in terms of economics and benefits that one can have in society. What do you do with the white guy who watched TV 40 years ago and was centered in everything he saw? Mm-hmm. And when he called in for customer service, it was just, there was no press 1 or 2 for this or that. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. Well,
what do you
I
do
think
with
what
that
you don't do is let that white guy's, sense of grievance about that, torch the planet, right? Which is really what's happening, right? You know what I mean? It's like we all have our issues, right? There are a lot of things I don't like, but I'm not willing, and this is the difference, right? I'm not willing to, to vote against my own interests, to keep Republicans in power, just so that maybe I might get, not have to have a sensitivity note before a violent movie or something. You know what I mean? It's just it's all out of whack, right? The cultural grievance. So I don't do anything about the cultural grievance because I don't care about the cultural stuff as much as I want our economy to work. I want us to solve big problems together. So, I just want to minimize that as something that should be a determining factor in the greatest country on earth's ability to deal with that.
We're in agreement about that.
No,
but
I
I'm
know
saying
you are.
if the idea is we want to inoculate folks from the argument that is going to emanate from the right about a broader grievance, right? Because it's the concept of hey, they're getting, Black people are getting special Obama phones. Mm-hmm. And, part of that is they're getting benefits. And so I don't like that program, but part of it, or Black farmers are getting benefits, but part of it is also that message in their minds is consistent with I turn on a Cialis commercial and there's a Black guy there. What happened to me? I used to be centered, or, it used to be I'm watching TV and whoever it was there was servicing me in somewhere. Maybe it was my mom. Maybe it was, my wife, but it was what is it? I mean, and I understand this is sort of outside that portfolio, but it feeds into those narratives, right?
Oh, it sure does. I mean, I think people have to have a more durable, resilient sense of self-worth that is not contingent on feeling better than others, and the exclusive, white men are a third of the population, and they're 2/3 of the people, in office, right? I mean, they're, it just being the dominant culture, identity, class is not necessary in order to have a decent life and a good life and to be happy. And, I think about it in terms of this conversation about white privilege, right? I mean, what racial justice advocates want is not to make white people afraid of the police, and white people have, crappily funded public schools, and white people not have as much access to healthcare, right? We want everybody to have those things. But if what was really an important part of it was the feeling that you got it because you were somehow better than the rest of your fellow Americans, and yeah, you're gonna have to give that up, right? You're gonna have to give up the advantage, but in a society that racial justice advocates are seeking, advantage is not the price of a happy life, right? It's actually, we all have those things. And so you sort of have to disentangle how much of the privilege is about just getting things that are scarce because we live in a brutal hierarchical society with, where we're sitting in the bottom of a drained pool and we don't have a right to healthcare and, childcare and education and all of those things that other countries have kind of figured out for themselves. Is it that we really have material needs? And so if you're not advantaged, then you actually won't have your material needs met? Or is it that you just want to feel like the society is saying, yeah, you are one of the best versions of humanity because you're a white guy? I think that's what we have to do. So that's why I think we have to refill the pool of public goods, right? We have to make people's lives better. And then, hopefully people will sort of loosen the grip a little bit because they won't feel, they have that fear of falling, right? As David Roediger wrote, this in a brutal sort of in a society with lots of economic vicissitudes, there was that feeling for the white working class, they could lose everything, but not whiteness, right?
Right.
That we want to make sure that people don't feel like they could lose everything. And really test what is the material value of whiteness. When it is so high, people want to hold on to it, but can we make it so that you don't have to be white to have a decent life?
It feels like, and I know this is a little far afield from where you are, but the concept of American exceptionalism feeds into this, right? We are the idea that we're going to have what we need as a country if we don't dominate the rest of the world in some way. It's really coming into the fore right now. I think as like we're reckoning with, the diminishment of American, at least soft power and maybe hard power too, for that matter.
Yeah, well, we threw it away. Right? We've thrown it away. That's a longer conversation about how it is that we threw it away and what race and colonialism and white supremacy have to do with our various adventures that have thrown this away, and how much, we are losing out in terms of economic vitality and innovation because we keep devaluing the labor of Black and brown people, both in terms of internally, where it's costing us trillions of dollars a year to have these racial economic divides for, sort of simple math reasons, right? If you have so many people on the sidelines, they can't be on the field scoring points, right? If we have so many people saddled with discrimination and debt and disadvantage, then obviously our economy is not going to be as productive. And you've got like Citigroup, counting it in $20 trillion, $16 trillion over the last 20 years. Citigroup says that the racial economic divides between Black and white families have cost us. So there's that version of it as well.
So is there a, Sam, did you want to go?
No, go ahead.
Is there like a marketing question when it comes to the Democratic Party in this area? Because like, I read Eric Levitz's piece a little while ago, which I think may have cited you about just avoiding white backlash when talking about policies that would be a little bit, that would advance. Because I think the Democratic Party is at least in the presidential primary, focused a lot on this would help Black people. This would be beneficial to alleviate racism, et cetera. But, a lot of what you're talking about, these universal programs, they're not being marketed that way by the Democratic Party. And they're moving much more towards a donor class in suburbia that dominates and pulls the strings behind the party. And then they also are counting on, of course, Black voters and voters of color as well. And there is some of that. Like, I don't really want to appeal to this guy that Sam's talking about, who's annoyed that he has to press 1 instead of 2. But there's also a lack of, I think, conscious efforts to broaden the discourse or broaden the marketing by the Democratic Party to people who might be on the fence in that area. I'm just wondering how you reckon with?
Yeah, I mean, the Race Class Narrative Project was our attempt to give Democrats a way to talk about race in a way that widens the circle of who was willing to listen, and that, as I said, inoculates some of those racially racially anxious, not economically anxious white voters, but also that builds a multiracial coalition. So I do think that's necessary. Obviously, I think an interesting thing to think about is, for my nearly 20 years in policy advocacy, I saw the Democratic Party catering to the white moderate and the white conservative and fearing the white backlash, not in terms of its messaging, not in terms of shifting the messaging, but rather what it meant was that they shifted the policy ambition, right? They were like, well, white voters aren't going to stand for a tax cut or universal child care or raising the minimum wage. That's not something we can even offer up because there's a sense of a backlash, right? And white voters are not going to tolerate deficit spending and all of these things. So what I'm happier about is that it's no longer like in the policymaking, this fear of the white moderate and this fear of what white voters will do, because that to me was always just the most self-defeating logic. And with the proposals, with the American Jobs Plan, the American Families Plan, you're finally, acting like government has a duty and a job and the power to make people's lives better, and that's amazing. Do I think that talking about canceling student debt or something like that only as a way to, disproportionately benefit Black borrowers who, have had to borrow more, not because we're like bad with money, but because of the racial wealth divide? That was the explicit creation of racist government policies, of explicitly racist government policies. Do I think that we should only talk about it that way? No, obviously not, right? You shouldn't tell, millions, tens of millions of affected borrowers, this is only benefiting some of you, when in fact it's benefiting all of them. But do I think that the white left enjoys picking those talking points, which are never the only thing in the fact sheet, right? It's always like the one bullet that's like, this will also address racial equity. Do I think the white left enjoys panicking about those messages because of whatever reason? Yeah.
Well, the reason probably is just implicit, or, I don't know, like things that they haven't dealt with themselves potentially. Maybe. Yeah.
What do you do with those who are not leaning on leveraging that the racism to fight these policies, right? Like I'm just thinking, as we're looking at like the infrastructure bill try and wind its way, and there's a couple of there's the Mansion and Cinema who have their sort of like a branding project. Then you have like a Mark Warner, who's out there, who's not necessarily, leveraging this stuff. I mean, I guess my point is, if race is sort of to mix metaphors, the howitzer in the quiver of preventing these type of universal policies, what remains if you are in some way essentially diffuse the worst parts of that howitzer?
You're saying what is is there a principled opposition to an infrastructure bill? Is that what you're asking me?
Yeah,
that is not about racial resentment.
Well, I mean, principled. I may not like the principle, which is like, we don't want to get in the business of providing any type of universality to people. But in terms of like a pushback in terms of a strategy, you provided in this book a strategy that deals with inoculating, at least to some extent, when race is used as a mechanism to sort of say like, hey, you don't really want a swimming pool because you're going to have to be swimming with Black people. What happens when that to what extent, or is this something that we don't even know how prominent you don't want a swimming pool because you know, you can attract water all over the place or something like that, or people could drown, you know, like,
Right.
do we have a sense of how big that is, or has race been so prominent
Yeah.
in that argument that it's just obscured that?
Right. I see what you're saying. So I think it's amazing. So in 1956 and 1960, 2/3 of white voters in America wanted a government job guarantee and a minimum income in the country. Right. Wanted the government to guarantee an income floor and a job if anyone, lost their job or couldn't find a private sector job. 2/3 of white Americans. Between 60 and 64, that fell almost in half to just 35%. So, and then I talk about in the book what happened between 60 and 64 in terms of the civil rights movement and the March on Washington, including those demands, for example. So, I think race had a lot to do with it then. I think that if you, poke around in the social science data and see how, being shown a headline that talks about demographic change makes white independent voters suddenly want to drill in the Arctic. I think it's weird, right? It's weird how prominent this is. And I also think it infects things that we don't think of as about race, like our individualism and our, sort of free market. It's like the free market's race neutral, right? Like you can be a sort of libertarian and be like, no, I'm the least racist person in the world. I don't want government, I want the market. And, I've started thinking about sort of the logic of that, like when libertarianism grew up as a sort of mainstream ideology was when the public that white folks were turning away from largely, because libertarianism is a largely white movement, the public became more diverse and the market is just a lot less diverse, right? When you're really talking about the market, I mean, ultimately you're talking about the powerful people in a market, which is the rich folks, right? In terms of who you turn to solve big problems, right? You turn away from the public and towards the private. And ultimately if you look at the distribution of power in the quote unquote free market, it looks a lot more like pre-civil rights America, right, than does the government even today, even though white men are still vastly overrepresented in the halls of power in government too. So I just think it's hard, right? You can't disentangle it. We wouldn't have had race, period, if it weren't for greed, right? So it's hard to disentangle our economic stories about who belongs and who deserves and what's right and what's wrong and who merits what from our core sense of a hierarchy of human value. I don't think we'd have such a low minimum wage if we hadn't started out, at zero. I don't think that we would tolerate, billionaires. There's this sense of, it's just a very steep hierarchy of human value. And I think it's really that animates our economy and it animates our consciousness about race.
It's funny when you said that about we wouldn't have such a minimum wage issue if we hadn't started at zero. I'm just reminded of a debate I had with Walter Block, who was a former Ron Paul advisor, who said, well, something's better than nothing. And that was like, that was the improvement. All right. Well, so lastly, what is the message can exist? I mean, it's clear, so you need a message that will build in the sort of critique, that is coming on some level, that racial leveraging of race. What is the methodology for that? I mean, is it are we talking about organizing? Tell us the second part of the subtitle, I guess.
How we can prosper together. How do we prosper together? Well, I'm a policy wonk. I think there are so many policies that we need to pass in order to minimize the mentality of scarcity, which is where you really get the zero sum starting to be, make common sense to folks. I think we need to refill the pool of public goods. And so, technically speaking, we need to reform the filibuster and move the jobs plan and the families plan, and make them stronger in a couple of significant ways. But in terms of the how to really get things done, not just in, with the majority that Democrats have in Washington, but sort of across the country, it is about organizing. And I'm not a grassroots organizer, but I couldn't help but fall in love with the craft and the art of it over the course of researching this book. I went around the country and talked to dozens of organizers, and that's where you get durable consciousness change, right? I talked to a young woman named Bridget, a fast food worker, white working class, Irish descent, who had totally, believed the anti-immigrant stuff and the stuff about Black people and crime. And she just, was sort of a product of her media ecosystem and her family. But it was through organizing with the Fight for 15 that she first saw herself in a Latina woman, as she said to me, and realized that it's not about us and them, as she said to me. She said, in order for us to come up, they've got to come up too, because as long as we're divided, we're conquered. And that came through organizing. That wasn't through seeing a political ad. That came through organizing for $15 in a union.
Well, there you go. Heather McGhee, the book is The Sum of Us, What Racism Costs Everyone and How We Can Prosper Together. Thank you so much for your time today. A real pleasure.
Thank you both.
Thanks, Heather.
All right, folks, going to take a quick break, and then we will wrap things up in just a moment. We are back, just wrapping up. Really fascinating work by Heather. She was formerly the head of Demos. She's still a fellow there, but had been doing great policy work for years. And
then I want to just correct them, because I said that Demos was quoted in that piece I cited, but it must have not been from her if she's still just a fellow. My apologies.
But I mean, I think, it is worth going back, or I should say, taking the time to read her book. The ethnography part of it. I mean, the conversations that she had with organizers around the country, definitely worth a read. And it is very hard to look at the data and not see that much of the resistance towards, regardless of what you're talking about, something like a single payer healthcare system or any type of universality about any of these programs, is a lot of the opposition, not all of it, but maybe a determinate amount, is driven by some order of racism. It may not be in their forefront of the minds of the opposition, but it is it is prominent. And I mean, just, you look at that, what happened between 1960 and 64, to have 35% of the population change its mind about it, the role of government, is pretty stunning. And there wasn't a lot else going on during that time other than a fight for civil rights. But Emma, that is our time for today. We will be back tomorrow. My voice will be maybe slightly better. Thanks for joining us if you were just watching on Peacock. And for those of you who are not, my voice is going to remain like this. I may drop out too. I don't know what it is. Sometimes I don't know why I'm dropping out, but we just got, Shore Wrap, Majority Report with another top-notch interview. I think the end of the year collection is going to have to be extended to fit all these interviews in. Yeah, we've had a bunch of really good, and then
Sam, you wrote that one.
I wrote that one. I did not write this one. Majority Report wardrobe coordinator. Why is there a Black guy in a Cialis commercial? Wait, you want to be the guy in the Cialis commercial? I was just using that as the example of
Monday,
the older white guy. Right. By the time we get to Friday, believe me, the commercials are going to be, the references are going to be nuts. Folks, just a reminder, it is your support that makes this show possible. When you become a member of the Majority Report, not only do we do top-notch interviews 4 or 5 times a week, but also, because 80%, I mean, Ted Williams barely hit a 400. 400 for a year was just like the best batter in baseball. But we're like 750 we're hitting.
Yes. It's not necessarily a realistic batting average, but it is.
Well, that said, I got to say, Saul, 750.
Are you still pitching to him?
I got news for you. We tried to do the kids pitching, and it was a disaster.
So the point is,
this is actually a big controversy in the league.
Mm.
We had kids pitching. I had one kid look at me. He's up at bat. The ball is going behind him. And he looks at me and goes, "How is this fair?" And I'm like, I know. Because the kids had all missed a year. So, but I pitched to everybody. I pitched to everybody equally when I pitch. You don't know what you're talking about. You're just accusing me of that.
Well, I mean, your son is batting 750, and then the other kid's like, the ball's behind me.
I didn't pitch to that kid. That was when the kids were pitching. That's my point.
Oh, gotcha. Sorry.
I mean, there's other kids who are hitting like that too. There's 2 or 3 kids who hit really well.
Well, look, we know Saul is, he's got that competitive edge you were telling me about.
Yeah, there you go. Folks, just a reminder, it's your support that makes this show possible. You can become a member by joining the Majority Report at jointhemajorityreport.com. Also, AM Quickie. Check it out, folks. You get the headlines of news, 6 or 7 minutes. Gives you a good start to your day. Don't sleep on the AM Quickie. Also, justcoffee.coop, fair trade coffee, tea, or chocolate. Use the coupon code MAJORITY. We should say, the Majority Discord. Check it out. majoritydiscord.com. We've got over 3,000 members of that Discord now, and growing. Also on Nomi's channel today, The Committee, 3 p.m. with Aaron Chaudhary at youtube.com/The Nomi Show. Matt, what's happening in the Matt Lekin media universe?
Well, first of all, when the next 45 people subscribe to the Left Reckoning YouTube channel, it will hit 10,000. So that's really exciting. Also, we had Brandon Sutton on. We talked about masks as a sort of culture war issue, and Supreme Court stuff. So check that out last Thursday. Patreon.com/Left Reckoning to get the post game. Oh, and I might Twitch at Literary Hangover tonight.
All right, folks. See you in the fun half. 646-257-3920. Left is best. Jamie and I may have a disagreement.
Yeah, you can't just say whatever you want about people just because you're rich.
I have an absolute right to mock them on YouTube.
He's up there buggy whipping like he's the boss.
I am not your employer.
I'm tired of the negativity.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to upset you. You're nervous. You're a little bit upset. You're riled up.
Yeah, maybe you should rethink your defense of that, you fucking idiots.
We're just going to get rid of you.
All right.
But dude. You want to smoke this joint?
Yes.
Do you feel like you are a dinosaur?
Some good shit.
Exactly. I'm happy now.
It's a win-win.
It's a win-win-win.
Oh, hell yeah.
Now listen to me. 2, 3, 4, 5 times. 847-906-501-457. 2, 38, 56, 27. 1/2. 5 8s. 3.9 billion.
Wow.
He's the ultimate math nerd.
Don't you see?
Why don't you get a real job instead of spewing vitriol and hatred, you left-wing Limbaugh?
Everybody's taking their dumb juice today.
Come on, Sammy.
Dance, dance, dance.
Ooh.
Rand Paul.
I had my first post-coital cradle scene with a woman. I'm hoping to add more moves to my repertoire. All I have is the dip and the swirl.
Fine, we can double dip.
Yes, this is a perfect moment.
No.
Wait, what?
You make under $1 million a year. You're scum. You're nothing.
Excuse me? Fuck you, you fucking liberal elite. I think you belong in jail.
Thank you for saying that, Sam. You're a horrible, despicable person.
All right, gonna take a quick break. I want to take a moment to talk to some of the libertarians out there. Take whatever vehicle you want to drive to the library. What you're talking about is jibber jabber.
Classic. I'm feeling more chill already.
Good. Donald Trump can kiss all of our asses.
Hey, Sam. Hey, Andy. You guys ready to do some evil?
Hitler was such an idiot.
That guy might be a Nazi.
Agree.
No.
Death to America.
You.
Yes.
Wow.
Wow, that's weird. No way. Unbelievable. This guy's got a really good hook.
Throw our hands up.
Ooh. Wow.
But Sam, I gotta get off.
No worries. Let's. I want to just flesh this out a little bit. I mean, look, it's a free speech issue. If you don't like me,
Hey, shut up!
Thank you for calling into the Majority Report. Sam will be with you shortly.
we are back. Fun half, folks. I'm sorry, I do not have tea. Just gonna have to bear with me. Let's do.
Do you have apple cider vinegar?
I mean, I have nothing.
What's with apple cider vinegar? Everyone's
It does everything
crazy.
right.
I guess. I'm
I just
suspicious.
with apple cider vinegar.
Okay, I know it's a trope, right?
Yeah,
But
it
I
is.
have a really bad dry scalp. People will catch me. I itch my hair all the time, and I put up, and that's the only thing that helps.
Well, all right.
I think
So
I have
you use it-
psoriasis
It doesn't seem like it's helping that much, though. I don't know. How do you know if it's
because I
helping if
don't
you-
do it frequently enough. Like I went to a dermatologist. They're like, "Here's a shampoo. It costs $300." I was like, "No." So I just do I tried a million home remedies, and the only one that works is apple cider vinegar. It also helps if I have a sore throat. You dilute it with some water and you take a little shot, and yeah, it smells like terrible, but it tastes terrible, but it helps.
All right.
Matt does not agree with me. I can feel his disagreement.
It really
through the-
smells terrible, too.
John MC Dropout. Bonjour, Majority crew, and happy Victoria Day from your Canuck comrades to the north. I am pleased to report receiving my first Pfizer dose on Friday, even though I'm deathly afraid of needles. If I can do it, any coward can. I can tell you this. I also was someone who was deathly afraid of needles. And then my dumb cat, and I say that lovingly, contracted diabetes. And I had to give him a shot every day, twice a day. Now the needle thing, like I'm not excited about it, but I'm not nearly as deathly afraid. I actually gave my buddy a shot the other day. A human being.
Just for fun?
Yeah, just to try it out. I was like, hey, I gave the cat a shot, and then I said, hey, let's see if I can do it on a human. No, he needed a shot of something.
Yeah, you guys were having a party, huh?
Oh yeah, that's the way I roll.
They party hard.
The idea, honestly, of using a needle for recreational drugs is just, I've never been able to understand that. Never ever.
Well, if it's at that point, it's not that recreational.
Well, I guess that's true. Heartbroken Toaster. Sam, I love the quickie, but you got to give it one more last look in the morning. The bit you read about your COVID numbers was played before and after quicker quickies this morning. Yeah, we caught that. There was a glitch in the editing software, and then I think we fixed it. This last Emma, the last IM of the day, there's more pollen this spring because most flowering plants produce more flowers and flowered earlier this year because spring came early this year, earliest on record, I think. Climate change, baby. Wyoming Ryan. Emma, sorry about the Knicks. I would like to say they had the whole game not to lose at the end like that.
Yep. It was, I mean, it's really hard to win when your best player, Randall's like, he was not playing well. So hopefully they can get it back on Wednesday.
Just Kafove Coop, Liz Cheney is a dick. Sean from NorCal. Sam, it isn't Axios's HBO. It's Axios on HBO. Okay. I guess I don't really care. I said the two words that were relevant, Axios, HBO, so I don't care. Vinny Holiday. Hi, Sam and Emma. Do you think it's coincidental that Tucker Carlson, Sager and Jetty, Joe Rogan and the Weinsteins all have the same talking points at the same time about UFOs, the lab leak theory, and the stolen election? My theory is they're trying to take over and expand the Alex Jones audience market, but with a cloak of legitimacy. I mean, I don't know. Do you think these talking points are really that sort of like unique and clever that they would need to be handed out? I just think
also like the lab leak thing has always been an outside hypothesis. The idea that it's just been an Alex Jones thing, like not like an intentional leak, but like there's a lab there that studies these things that it escaped that might have happened.
Yeah, I don't think it's been as, like, there was little evidence of it when people would disparage the theory, but there was at one point they sent the WHO sent people there a couple of months ago. They said it was unlikely that it leaked, but there's more evidence that's coming out, which doesn't make it any, I don't know what the percentage is. It's possible. Everybody knew this at the time, but I guess the weird part is like, okay, I mean, I think like,
they insinuate more when they cover it with the way they cover it.
Yeah. I mean, the weird part about it is that like, look, it is possible. And I think like the lesson would be like, hey, we need to have more oversight of these things. Like maybe it would be good to have, Americans or multinational people stationed there. Oh, wait, what? There was?
Why are we funding so much biological war, research through the DHS without any sort of like in a blank check matter?
Yeah. Well, I mean, first off, there was supposedly more of a program to observe this stuff that Trump cut. But put that aside, there also just needs to be much better controls on this stuff. Period. End of story. But there's two flavors of people who are pushing this. One is to say that, science is dangerous, or one that is anti-science, and one that is anti-Chinese. I mean, these are basically the two flavors, right? And then there are people I think who are pretending like it was, sort of covered up by whatever. And the only truth tellers are the people who really don't have any more information than we do.
Yeah, I mean, the same people that are just sort of exploiting the uncertainty of science around things like masks or vaccines also exploit this uncertainty.
Yeah, exactly. Sam, please drink some tea. I'll even up my membership tier if you put some honey in it. Just picturing Sam giving a man an adrenaline shot is like Uma Thurman in Pulp Fiction. It's not quite that, but let's see, where are we here? Jessica Fove, the voting machines, Sean from NorCal, the voting machines involved in the fake audits going on cannot be used again. My suspicion is that they knew that their actions would result in the obsolescence of the machines in an attempt to replace them with Ivanka Trump trademark voting machines. Vinny Holiday. Hi, Sam. Okay. Graham Page. Hi, Sam. I have to say goodbye to my dog, Ollie, this afternoon. Oh, I'm so sorry. Can we send him off with a shofar? Yes. Ollie, this is for you. You were a good dog. Sorry to see you go, buddy. That's very difficult. I'm sorry you're going through that, Graham. New regular, is the Liz and Liz Cheney short for Lizard? Monica. Boston Bernie, bro. Hello, Tushy has changed my life in less than a month. Just spent the weekend away from home and I really missed that butt spray. There you go. As Onga Fart and Crease. Okay, great. Hey, Sam, what's you guys' opinion on modern monetary theory? We've had Stephanie Kelton on this program, maybe, I don't know, 8 times over the years. I mean, I've had her on since very, very early in her spraying. To the extent that I understand it, I think it's actually pretty spot on. I think we were living under the auspices of when we were tied to gold, the gold standard, for many, many, many years in this country. And it was simply because I think it suited a certain class of people to believe that those constraints were still on us. My only concern is that we don't necessarily have the political ability to raise taxes when we may or may not need to. That's my big, but in terms of its, an analysis of what's going on, I think it's pretty good. Libertarian recovery. Emma crushed the Gravel Institute video. Was definitely thrown off seeing Emma standing. Oh, is it out yet?
Yeah, it's out.
We got to play it.
I don't want to.
You should send people to their YouTube page to watch.
Yeah, just watch it on the Gravel Institute. I don't like watching myself.
Well, why don't we play like just the first like 15 seconds of it so that we can send people. All right, let's do this, ladies and gentlemen. Emma's gonna have to close her eyes now. She doesn't like to watch herself on video.
I gotta hear myself too. It sucks.
Not necessarily the best choice of careers.
Well, I'm already down. I'm already in it. What are you gonna do?
All right, here we go.
There we go.
In a lot of ways, America is a strangely right-wing country. No universal health care, no universal child care, poor labor protections. Everyone knows this. But why is that? Well, if you look at American history, you actually find a pretty interesting reason. Unlike other industrialized countries, America never—
Pause it. If you want to see the rest of this, folks, you got to head over to watch Emma's debut on the Gravel
I love where
Institute.
you paused it right there. Look at my face. It's like really flattering.
I was trying to pause it at a place where there would be some suspense. Why didn't America adopt socialism? So head over there, just Google why didn't America adopt socialism. We will put the link in our YouTube channel. Check out Emma at the Gravel Institute. That's exciting.
It was really fun. Those guys are great, and I learned a good amount too through the making of that video. So, but the official Force the Vote account, Sam, didn't like that I was talking about socialism at the Gravel Institute. Did you hear about this over the weekend?
I did not. I have not been following the official Force the Vote.
Yeah, I missed that they had officialized that.
I thought it might have been a parody account, but turns out it was real.
Wait, is it a real official?
I don't know. It's whatever it was just like I got, it was whatever. Whatever's left of that stuff. Yeah, they took umbrage with me being included. So I had a little fun with it over the weekend.
It's unbelievable what the most durable thing about that whole thing, the most successful thing about it was that wow, that's unbelievable.
This is hilarious.
Let's go to the phones. Calling from a 408 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hi, is this me?
Yeah, it is you. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
This is John from California.
John from California. What's on your mind? John?
Yeah. Yes. Hello.
John from California, what is on your mind?
I wanted to talk a little bit about the situation going on in Burma right now.
In Burma? Okay.
Yeah, and then possibly plug a nonprofit if people want to donate.
Okay.
So I don't know how closely you guys have been following the situation in Burma currently, but it's come to a point where protesters have been allying with ethnic minority groups that have been basically fighting civil wars with the military government since some groups since like the early 1940s. And they in retaliation for
dude, there's something wrong with your phone.
Hello? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. So protesters have been allying with these ethnic minority groups that have their own separate militaries, and they've been training and fighting with them. And the government has been retaliating by launching airstrikes in these ethnic states and targeting civilian areas. So numbers I've heard recently are up to 800 dead and over 50,000 internally displaced people.
Wow.
Yeah. And, you know, these ethnic armies don't have like the firepower to deal with aircrafts that are being supplied by China and Russia. So it's kind of, you know, it's not really an even playing field. And the refugees that are trying to flee are getting turned back from the bordering nations like Thailand, India, and whatnot. Yeah. And also, journalists have been arrested, and independent media sources have lost their licenses. So it's hard to get information out of the country.
Okay. And so where should people go to get more information on this? And you wanted to support what? Something for the refugees?
Yeah, so there's a nonprofit organization called Community Partners International. Their website is cpintl.org. They operate in Burma and also in Bangladesh, and they've been focusing right now on IDPs and the Rohingya refugees, and they've been working in like a major refugee camp for the Rohingya. When there's a big fire, they got like 500 volunteers to help out, and they're working on delivering COVID vaccines for the minorities.
Okay.
Yeah, and if you guys want to learn more about it, you can go to Radio Free Asia. It's a news site that covers like all of Southeast Asia, and it's in English, and you guys can learn more about like the situation in Burma.
All right. Thank you. I appreciate it.
All right. Thanks.
Right.
Thanks so much.
Calling from a 915 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Yes, hello?
Yep.
Hey, how you doing? This is Ruben from El Paso, Texas.
Ruben from El Paso, Texas. What's on your mind?
How's it going? Yeah, I'm actually calling in to see if I can clear up some of my ignorance or at least understand the situation better. And it's regarding the universal college, which I'm actually in favor for, but it is the implementation that I'm kind of struggling with.
Okay.
I can understand, you know, people that they want to become doctors, that being definitely paid for by the taxpayers and teachers and other essential, you know, progressing profession. But where I can't reconcile is, you know, to pay for somebody to go learn underwater basket weaving or 15th century French literature is something that I can't see that would help the country.
Well,
and I'm kind of
okay. So just to be clear, I get where you're coming from. Just to be clear, though, when we talk about a universal free college, right? It is a free college option in every state. Okay, that's what it is. It's not paying for everybody's going to college. First off, okay. I just so we're on the same page as we understand what the proposal is.
Okay, well that it does change my thought a little bit. Because
you have to get in.
Actually, just free college. Everybody just gets to go to college.
No. It is a free college option. In other words, if I go to Harvard or I don't know Princeton, the government's not going to pay for that. It's basically more like if I go to one of like the SUNY schools, like state of New York schools, the government would pay for that.
Okay, but but within these schools, what would it also be kind of like a structured?
No, I think the idea is. I think the idea is that part of the theory behind it is that we want people to be able to study what they want to study, to go into the type of careers they want to go into. I could make an argument that like underwater basket weaving, if that was actually a thing, would actually maybe have some value, particularly with what's happening with climate change, because they may have wide swaths of people having to weave baskets underwater. But I think like, look, there's value to society to have people who are aware of 15th century French literature. We don't know.
Yeah, the humanities are just massively important, and if we can't just turn college into something that prepares workers.
It's not a vocational school. Now, with that said, the proposals that I have seen for a free college option also call for free vocational training as well. But I think, look, you cannot assume that what someone studies in college is or is not going to benefit society.
Well, of course,
presumably.
That's something like that. I would lead to the Department of Labor to say, okay, the country needs more teachers for the next 10 years.
But the problem
is the country needs more scientists.
But here's the thing,
and those
here's the
professions
thing
would be paid for.
Part of the problem is that that's a very tough game to predict. Okay, very tough. I can tell you, there's going to be a lot more people who go to into public health in the next couple of years than would have, but for a pandemic. There's definitely. I mean, we can't predict these things, but we do know this, that as it stands now, student debt keeps people from becoming teachers. Student debt keeps people from becoming social workers. Student debt keeps people from going into a wide range of occupations that society needs, but we just don't reward enough financially to pay off mountains of student debt. And so this stuff is going to take care of itself, I think. You don't have to worry about like, and the fact of the matter is that people are avoiding studying 15th century French literature because of that very fact. And we're going to want a couple of those people around.
There's been a massive drain in the histories. It's been horrible. Like the amount of people that are covering history and our sense of it, and who that serves is, I think, clear, like in terms of the power structure.
Let's put it this way. Do you want just wealthy people to be studying history?
No, personally, I know I don't. And I understand everything you're saying, and I agree with 99% of it. That only 1% that keeps holding me back is, are we actually using the funds from the taxpayers to its best ability? Are we getting the best out of the dollar spent? Are we getting the scientists that we need? Are we getting the doctors that we need? Are we getting the teachers that we need? Are we getting the professions that there's going to drive this country forward in a progressive way?
All I can tell you is that the reason why we don't, to the extent that and I don't know that we have an undersupply of scientists, If you want scientists to be studying a specific thing or practicing, you need to fund that by the government too, because all the market does is produce scientists who are going to produce a product that has sales. You know, for instance, I was just talking to somebody last night. Do you know that migraines are, first of all, I don't know if you know anybody who gets migraines regularly, but they're okay. You do, right? They're debilitating.
Yes, sir.
Right? They're incredibly debilitating.
Yes, sir.
And
You gotta hide in the closet.
And they also are experienced, like they're one of the most widely spread afflictions in the world. And the amount of medications that exist for migraines is infinitesimally small, because for a long time, drug companies couldn't find profit in it. And so the bottom line is like, look, if you're going to come to me like, you know, we really need to have financiers in this country, I would say, well, then free college is not going to help out with that, because not having free college drives people into a narrow set of professions. I don't know what, maybe it would be more efficient to choose whose professions we're going to subsidize, but probably not, because it's, you know, you're 10 years out, very hard to predict. But I can tell you this, like, if you can get to 99% sure on a policy, go for it. We need a society that money does not dictate what people pursue in terms of knowledge and interest. And frankly, in many respects, in innovation, when it comes to things like medicine and, other things that have like a societal value. We don't want money to dictate those things. And the way you do that is by taking the cost of learning about that stuff off the table.
But in the problem of that scenario is the cost is not off the table, but it's just transferred to another area.
Well,
because somebody still
it's
has
transferred
to pay for those universities. Somebody still has to pay those teachers.
Absolutely.
So it ends up being another person on the
I'm
other side
saying
of the country
cost off the table.
For somebody to
I
learn French.
hear you. I'm saying cost off the table for the person whose career we're talking about. Yes, it's taxation. Just like, what's the value of roads? The value of roads, or let's say, trains, is that, I can't tell you what the most efficient road is going to be, but it creates a better society. Transportation creates a better society. The mail creates a better society. Is it the most efficient use of our dollar? Well, not if we're sending it to, someone who lives way out in the boonies, but it creates a better society. And so, the mail doesn't, when we build all this infrastructure, it's free to you as you drive on the road, but it's coming out of taxes either that you pay or people who have accrued an even bigger benefit out of society pay back in as part of their dues. I mean, look,
I agree.
If you're an actor and you belong to SAG, you pay a percentage of what you made that year. There's a baseline of dues, but you pay a percentage of what you made because the situation has been set up. The whole system for actors has been set up, and it's not just made by a few actors. There's a few that have had the biggest benefit. But the fact is that the whole industry exists on a lot of people who show up to auditions and don't get anywhere and don't make as much money. And so, you pay a percentage, you pay based upon the benefit you get out of the existence of society. So appreciate the call.
Definitely, Sam. Thank you very much for taking it.
My pleasure. And look, folks, if you got something that you think is like 90%, I would go for it. 99%. That's a slam dunk. There's no 100%.
Also, I would just emphasize that it's not, we're spending too much on the humanities that we're not having the scientists we need in this country. If that was the problem, we'd be maybe a little bit better off than we are.
Also, you can be an anthropology major and then go into marketing. Like you don't necessarily need to have your.
Oh, well, we should abolish marketing.
Yeah, don't go into marketing. Go into something else.
Okay, the example, just like that, like your college major does not necessarily determine. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Right.
Right.
There you go.
Or you could study 15th century French literature and you'd be a great teacher.
True.
Well, I mean, you could be. Calling from a 954 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Sammy, Michael from Miami.
Michael from Miami. Long time no hear from.
Hal, you are too popular. What can I tell you? You cannot get in for love or money. I'm not kidding. I mean, I'm happy for you, but it's like the old days when it was just, a bunch of us listening to you. Them days is gone. So congratulations on your success. I'm very happy for you. I'm almost proud of you. I know we never met, but speaking of which, I do need to get you that box of grapefruit still because I got holy hell last time. So this time I'm going to get the right address and you get to get the real deal. So I promise.
Okay, by real deal, let's clarify. So Michael, I can't even remember what the bet was, but Michael from Miami, we had some bet where I was like, send me a box of grapefruits. And the dude sends me a box of California grapefruits.
Right.
And I'm like, I can get California grapefruits. I want the Florida grapefruits.
And I got it for you, pal. There's called an Indian River Fruit Farm.
I know Indian River Fruit Farm.
It's right down the street. I'm going to pay up. I promise.
All right.
You're impossible to reach. Your calls, you take like 2 or 3 calls, and you're gone. I mean, you guys get into it, and I'm happy for you all, but man, oh man, I don't know. I mean, some days you want to make it calls only, but it's, like I said, your popularity's outstripped yourself. You're getting calls from all over the world. Because now you know that better than I do. Okay, real quick. Emma, congratulations. Good to hear from you, and nice contribution. And I dig the fact that you're totally into sports. That is way cool.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
My condolences on your Knicks choking their guts out last night. But with Julius Randle goes 6 for 23, you're not going to win many games. So
yep, he's got to be better.
7 though.
You think a 1 in 7? The thing is, the Hawks are more talented, but I like Trae Young style of basketball.
You got nobody to check Trae Young. That's your problem. But there's not many people in the league can check Trae Young anyway. So
there's one, but they won't put him in. They won't. I mean, we got to play Elfrid Payton for some fucking reason. But keep going.
He can't score. You can't put guys in that can't score. You're going to get into a track. See, Thibodeau's teams, this is going to totally drive the offense away, but anyway, Thibodeau's teams are notoriously defensive oriented. They want to win games in the 80s and the 90s. That is not going to work. And you've got an up-tempo team. You're going to want to play that way. Pat Riley learned the hard way. My guys, we're struggling with. I'm a Heat season ticket holder, and they're struggling with the Bucks. So
you compare Frank with Emmanuel Quickley. You compare him with Derrick Rose. It doesn't necessarily if he's good enough to come in cold in the final 5 seconds of the first half and then the game to guard Trae Young, he should be able to get some minutes. I think it's a little rigid by Tibbs.
Okay, and on that,
I would agree. But we could do this all day long. But
yeah. No, you could not. Somebody would hang up the
Sammy.
phone. Yeah.
Obviously, you know what's going on down here regarding the belly of the beast. We're home to Trump 2.0.
Yeah.
And also his mini me, which is now apparently the president of Fox News, or at least he wants to be. It's. I know you guys see it from afar, but it's worse up front. And even though I'm in a blue county, it's punishing to have to live through this crap. The stuff he's getting away with and the things he's essentially positioning himself for right now are going to be very hard to get around based on the voter suppression laws they just passed, as well as the fact that the state Democratic Party down here is back asswards and beyond help. So I'm afraid we're going to get stuck with him for another 4 years next year. Unless something miraculous happens.
DeSantis.
Yep.
Well,
Val Demings is running against Rubio, by the way. Now, if you have any hope of getting her elected, you have got to keep those losers in the consultancy class away from her. Because if she starts coming on, and I know I'm going to piss a lot of you guys off, and I apologize, but you cannot take positions that are just going to irritate people who live in the I-4 corridor and other swing areas in the Tampa suburbs and expect to win a statewide office.
What position?
We haven't won one here since Jesus was a baby.
All right.
Okay. Pre-Jeb Bush. Jeb Bush, not George. Jeb Bush.
What positions are you talking about?
Well, she's going to run against Marco Rubio for U.S. Senate. She's going to announce within the next week or so. And she's hoping to use the same, I would say, probably formula that Andrew used up 3 years ago, minus the problems he had at the end with the FBI.
Gillum,
but,
yeah.
Yeah, Gillum, right, exactly. There was for those who are uninitiated, there was a question regarding some type of influence peddling investigation against Gillum that broke about 2 weeks before the election against DeSantis, and essentially caused a lot of the independents to either go with DeSantis or just kind of stay home, which hurt obviously in a big way. He still only lost by 0.3%. Now, a lot of stuff came out afterwards, which was unfortunate, but it proved to people that Florida, when Trump is not on the ticket, is a winnable state if they ever just get their act together. But we have no one down here even reasonably close to a Stacey Abrams to organize anybody. And there's so much money to be had with this. You know, you get 7 television markets in the top 50 down here. That's a shitload of money that people are not going to turn their backs on. So unfortunately, you have to govern like or campaign like you would in California, which essentially is a TV market campaign anyway. And that puts a lot of pressure to use the same old idiots, the same old losers, see Robbie Mook, et cetera,
right,
to get in there and start monkeying with these campaigns, and they just end up just destroying the candidate's credibility. If she can run somehow a grassroots campaign and stay, I know you don't like to hear this, but center left, she's got a shot. She definitely has a shot. Marco Rubio is not invincible, and he doesn't have Rick Scott's war chest.
Right. And so characterize to us, though, like, what is there any value or is there any relevance to the $15 minimum wage passing? Like, I mean, couldn't a proper,
yes and no.
Well, let me ask you this. Couldn't a proper politician, even though I understand it's, state politics, I mean, it's we're talking about the legislature here, and, or we're talking about the governor as opposed to the Senate. But even if you're running for Senate, couldn't you make the argument that, like, Florida needs real representation? They keep voting for $15 minimum, $15 minimum wage or franchisement for former, incarcerated,
the convicted felon rule.
Yeah, and couldn't you get out there and say, in Florida, politicians for some reason never represent the interests of Floridians?
Sure.
I'm going to do that. Would that work?
Well, it worked with, it depends on the coalition. I owe you a box of grapefruits because Barack Obama was able to coalesce a certain group of people and craft his message to such a degree, plus the fact that George W. Bush and the policies of the Republicans coming out of 07, 08 were incredibly unpopular, and he won the state. Yes, it can be done. And the very fact that Andrew Gillum got within, 30,000 votes of beating DeSantis, and Bill Nelson, who ran like a corpse against Rick Scott, got within 10,000 votes, shows that there's votes to be gotten there. The problem is, you could make an argument, but in our state, it's about turnout. People are so hardened in their ways. We are essentially a 50-50 state, but the bicameral legislature is controlled by the Republicans. The state house has been controlled by Republicans since '94. We haven't elected a statewide officer, except for Nikki Fried, who's going to run against DeSantis and get annihilated, next year. We haven't elected anyone of a statewide.
You think Nikki Fried's going to get annihilated?
Years.
You think Nikki?
She has no chance. No, she has no chance. Look, guys, I got to tell you the truth, okay? My state, in many ways, is still representative of the Old South. North of Orlando is essentially considered South Georgia, and the central part of the state's very conservative as well. But they're more what they used to call business Republicans. On the Gold Coast, where I live down here, it's progressive, but Trump cut into a lot of that, both with a lot of hysteria about socialism and nonsense, which was never properly refuted. And then the other thing he did is he got the turnout. The Puerto Rican vote that we thought was going to be so helpful following the hurricane and moving into Central Florida, it went 55-45 Republican. So, I mean, how do you explain that? Because it's ineptitude, poor organization, poor messaging, and they just continue to feed on one another. So the answer to your question is, it could work with the right person making the delivery. There's a mayor out of Orlando, Buddy, I forgot his last name. You guys wouldn't like any part of his politics, but a guy like that could win. See, because a guy like that runs like a Biden clone. And we had this discussion many times, and God rest his soul, I love Michael a lot, but, we used to disagree about this. I would say, you guys have got to alter your message somewhat in order to get elected. Then once you get in office, you can do what you need to. I think Biden's first 100 days proved that. It's not perfect. I agree. But you guys got to understand, he lives in a world where compromise is impossible, even though he keeps trying to do it. But he has to get elected first before he can do any good. And this is the one thing I've always thrown my hands up with the left. Get elected first. Get in there. Then you can worry about going ahead and making progressive changes. But you can't make it by standing on the outside. It's not going to work. So, you know, with the right person, it's possible. Right now, I'm not optimistic. I like Val Demings a lot too, by the way. I do. I think she's strong.
Well, I guess.
You like her?
I mean, as a candidate?
Yeah.
I think she strikes me as someone who's a good candidate to take on a DeSantis. I mean, obviously, her politics are a little bit to the right of mine. I'm not a big fan of the fact that she's a former cop.
Chief of police in Orlando.
Yeah.
Chief of police.
Yeah. But I think that in terms of Florida, I mean, I would rather her than Rubio, let's say.
Well, it's going to be close. It'd be interesting to see how the voter suppression tactics take on, a characterization towards next year. I think you would agree with me that Stacey Abrams' run against Kemp next year is going to be really the bellwether. We'll see if her ability to organize outstrips their ability to, disenfranchise people. It'll be really interesting. I know you guys don't like the horse race aspect of it.
As of 30 minutes ago, I'm being told Stephanie Murphy dropped out of against Rubio. So, or
Stephanie Murphy did.
Yeah.
No, it's Val. Val's going to run. That's going to happen. They're clearing the field to try to get her to do this. But look, guys, an African American woman in parts of this state isn't going to get elected dog catcher. It's just not going to happen, despite her resume being pretty solid. We're different than Texas and Georgia, okay, and those other demographically changing states. North Carolina include that as well. Unlike those states, which got a high influx of immigrants from East Africa, from other parts of South America, from other parts of Eastern and Western Europe, okay, which have changed the demographics of Texas especially. Okay, Harris County is a prime example. We didn't get that. We got all the disaffected and pissed off racists from the Northeast, all the people tired of paying high taxes, all the people who got tired of standing in line behind what they would consider to be bitchy women or, uppity people. We got all those racists. They all decided to come down here. And that's what changed the influx of the electorate. So that it's going to be harder for us to change over and become purplish. We're actually redder now than we were 10 years ago, which is depressing in and of itself.
Well, Michael, it was good to hear from you again, and I cannot wait for the grapefruits.
Buddy, I just need to get an address. Is there a way I can get an email and I'll send it to you, and then that way we don't end up having some guy down the street eat all the fruits of my labor, as Ted Kennedy used to say?
Send me an email at majorityreporters@gmail.com.
I'll do it before the end of the day. Congratulations,
Thanks,
Emma, again. Good to hear the crew.
All right.
Hey, real quick, Sam, I know this is probably a verboten topic, but I go way back. So you and Cliff, are you guys still okay, or is that irreparable?
I mean, we're not. We have no personal. There's no personal problem between us.
Oh, okay.
No,
I go back to the days with him and Chris Rosen and all those guys.
Chris Rosen won't talk to me anymore. Take it easy, Michael.
No, you outed him. You found out he was a critic who never did any critiques. It was great.
Yep.
He never saw any movies.
Talk to you later. Old school. That is old school. We got a lot of Scotty B is back. I'm glad to hear that. But let's go right in on with this. I thought was there's a lot of stuff humming around. I've been saying for a couple of weeks, right? Like since the 100th day. When was that? Sometime in April, right? That the next 100 days are going to be the most telling, and you're starting to see it's starting to, things have been very blurry. You get the sense that somebody's turning the ring and the focus is changing a little bit. There were reports the other day that Democratic Senate leadership was meeting with the parliamentarian, that is to get an idea of what needs to be in a reconciliation bill for the for the infrastructure bill. Joe Biden came out the other day with his budget and basically, or didn't come out with a budget, but basically talked about what was not going to be in the budget, which means that the budget's coming out soon, but they want to get all of the anger out of the way. Like, how the F is there no public option? What good are you if you cannot cut down on prescription drug costs?
These were campaign promises, by the way.
Indeed.
So it's like, I mean, we just had Mike call in and say, oh, you got to get elected first, right? When you run on your platform. I mean, these were things Biden ran on to the left of where he is right now.
Yep.
In the general.
And, but all of this is sort of happening, trying to figure out, like, what the legislation is going to be. And I think, from an electoral and legislative position, like, I think something for Joe Manchin, let me put it this way. If Joe Manchin actually ever takes a vote to in any way inhibit the filibuster, and he may not, if Joe Manchin ever takes a vote in reconciliation in favor of stuff that he sort of said that he's sort of against and whatnot, the way that he's going to be able to do it is he's going to be able to talk a little bit about January 6th, this commission. The 180, and look, I think they should have a commission. I think they should just do an investigation. There's a lot of stuff that's important to find out, I think, about like why it was such a failure, particularly like if you think it's $2 billion worth of security needed, I would rather you just find out what went wrong and spend, $15 essentially, or just get people to do what they're supposed to do. But as a political matter, Joe Manchin, if he does anything, if he takes any risks, if he makes that vote, he's going to say, when I saw the Republicans change their mind on the January 6th commission, then I sort of knew that we didn't have a partner in negotiations. That's what he's going to do. And so this stuff is pretty important. Here is Aaron Burnett interviewing Carlos Jimenez from Florida's 26th. This is, he is asked about how he could argue that Trump didn't incite the riot on the 6th. This is not a smart response from somebody who wants to downplay this thing because, well, here it is.
On that day, Congressman, you voted against certifying the results of the election in 2 states. Now, those two states would not have changed the ultimate outcome of the election.
That's
you
correct.
have said Biden is the legitimate president of this country.
Yes.
But you know that 67% of people, according to the latest CBS poll of Republicans, do not believe Joe Biden is the legitimate winner of the 2020 election. Do you have any regrets about how your vote fed into what Trump was saying? He linked those things together, his lie, that could be contributing to Republicans refusing to accept a legitimate president.
Absolutely. I have no regrets over my votes on that day. I voted not to impeach the president because I didn't think he incited the events that happened. I know for a fact that I saw people in my hotel room that were saying they were going to do something at 2 o'clock, and that happened at 9 o'clock in the morning. And I also know, and I still believe, that Arizona and Pennsylvania, the election laws were violated, and that the legislature, who is the rightful place where these laws are made, those laws were violated. And that's the reason why I voted not to certify Arizona and Pennsylvania, which.
First off, his understanding of the legislatures voting on these things, it's a bunch of gobbledygook, but the legislature, put that aside. He was in his hotel room on January 6th in his hotel. He walks out of the hotel. He hears people at 9 a.m. Now, he's saying that Donald Trump could not have incited these people to crash the Capitol because they were already planning to crash the Capitol. How do I know this? Because at 9 a.m., I heard them say they were ready to crash the Capitol. You understand the problem he has here? his argument as to why Donald Trump did not incite this thing is that because it was a pre-planned attack on the Capitol. It didn't just happen in that moment.
Yeah. Trump incited it before that point also, and including on the day. And
on the day of. On the day of, he's chanting like,
on the day of,
or whatever.
But that was after this guy's.
Aside from the fact that does not exculpate, what's the word I'm looking for? It doesn't exculpate Trump. Put that aside. Dude, you're a congressman. Don't you think you probably should have reported that you're aware of a plot to attack the Capitol? And do you think nobody else was aware of it? They're talking about it why did they come there thinking this was going to happen? Why did you continue to vote the way you did when you knew this was premeditated attack on the Capitol?
Also, don't you love how he's trying to essentially have it both ways by only voting to basically overturn or saying that he believes that only a few of the states were full of fraud, but Biden's still the legitimate president. It's like this bizarre way to skin a cat here.
When there's a commission, I want to bring this guy up as one of the early witnesses and find out more about this whole pre-planning that he was aware of. That they were that's pretty stunning. That is pretty stunning. And his argument has to be that they were going to do that regardless of whether the president held a rally there.
It's pretty impressive that his fact finding was better than, the Capitol Police.
Yeah. It's just a shame he didn't share with them.
Yeah, could have given them a heads up.
Let's move on, shall we? Tough weekend for Marjorie Taylor Greene. Here is Marjorie Taylor Greene on with is it what show is this? The with David Brody. Brendan.
Show is it? It's Real America's Voice.
Real America's Voice.
The water cooler.
The water cooler. Here we go.
Great. Interesting.
This woman
graphic.
is mentally ill. We can look back in a time in history where people were told to wear a gold star.
Pause
and they
it.
were
Hold on.
definitely treated like second.
She's talking about Nancy Pelosi. Did we clarify? So, we dove right into she's mentally ill, but she's talking about Pelosi.
And we should be clear, she's not talking about herself.
Yes. There's a lot of projection happening, but still not talking about herself explicitly.
This woman is mentally ill. We can look back in a time in history where people were told to wear a gold star, and they were definitely treated like second-class citizens, so much so that they were put in trains and taken to gas chambers in Nazi Germany. And this is exactly the type of abuse that Nancy Pelosi is talking about. Well, let's talk about the Queen of the House of Hypocrites.
So here she is, essentially
she listened to Glenn Beck last week.
A mask mandate in the House, we should say. It's in the House of the Representatives. If you are unvaccinated, is the equivalent of Nazis forcing Jews to wear yellow stars in public so that they can be assaulted. And actually that did come with basically a second-class citizenry in the war, in the eyes of the state, I should say. Getting on the train's probably a little bit lower than second class.
How do you say, between one thing and the other, it's hard to compare which you would rather be involved in as a victim?
But the Jews know it. The Jews have been there. They know what it means to wear a mask during a pandemic if you're unvaccinated. They know. We know. That was her on Friday. Here she is on Saturday when someone says, hey, this is an Arizona reporter. Bianca Buono, Arizona News 12. You understand that comparison might be a little bit offensive to Jewish people. I mean, frankly, it should be offensive to everyone just because how stupid it is. But
yeah, and because currently Marjorie Taylor Greene is accusing Ilhan Omar and AOC of anti-Semitism because they don't support apartheid in Palestine.
Here is that question.
The American Jewish Congress has expressed concern over your comments comparing mask mandates to the Holocaust. Do you stand behind those comments?
You know, here's what I stand by. We shouldn't be having this kind of treatment. No one should be treated like a second-class citizen for saying I don't need to wear a mask or saying that my medical records are my privacy based on my HIPAA rights.
Pause it. I'm so sorry.
So,
I'm so sorry. As she's being interviewed at some sort of event, that's probably, do we know where this was?
This was like support the Arizona audit.
Right. She was, I'm assuming, some sort of guest at this Republican event.
By Matt Gaetz.
Right. This is part of their tour across the country. Being treated like a second-class citizen, as I'm sure her name is plastered all over some billboard at this Republican voter fraud event. But yes, she's the one who's oppressed. Because the Pelosi thing that from before, that just applies to the 435 members of the House of Representatives. So that's what she's implying, is that she's a part of that. I mean, she's trying to zoom it out and say, you know, mask mandates in general are like this, but I mean, keep going.
we shouldn't be having this kind of treatment. No one should be treated like a second-class citizen for saying I don't need to wear a mask or saying that my medical records are my privacy based on my HIPAA rights. And so I stand by all of my statements. I said nothing wrong. And I think any rational Jewish person didn't like what happened in Nazi Germany, and any rational Jewish person doesn't like what's happening with overbearing mask mandates and overbearing vaccine policies.
Do you understand, though, why some would be upset and offended by the comment?
Well, do you understand how people feel about being forced to wear masks or being forced to have to take a vaccine or even have to say that whether they've taken it or not? These are just things that shouldn't be happening in America. This is a free country, and it's just ridiculous to have these kind of conversations.
Well, I don't want to get into, if you send your kid to public school, they got to have certain shots. Like, I mean, that apparently she's letting that slide. I
went to a stand-up comedy show. I went to a stand-up comedy show on Friday night, and they made me tell them whether or not I was vaxxed or not. And I'm like, gosh, this is like Nazi Germany.
It's like Nazi Germany. Well, listen, as a rational Jew, I can tell you, rational Jews did not like the Holocaust. Matt, did you like being asked if you were vaccinated?
No, I didn't.
Okay, same thing. Same thing. Same thing.
That was the best part of it. When she said rational Jews, they didn't like the Holocaust. It's like, yeah, I mean, are you trying to do an understatement on purpose to like make the mask mandate kind of come a little closer? Yeah, I don't think Jewish people like the Holocaust. I'm just going to go out on a limb.
What's your least favorite food?
Ooh, I really don't like Brussels sprouts.
Yes. Okay. Well, that's why Brussels sprouts are like the Holocaust. You don't like Brussels sprouts, and many people did not like the Holocaust.
I see where you're coming from now. Yeah. Now I get it. Now I get how you must feel when I talk about the Holocaust all the time, Sam.
I feel like other politicians are cynical, but Marjorie Taylor Greene, I really believes this.
Oh, yes.
They're like, could you see how others might construe this as, or feel this as insensitive? She doesn't understand that.
Oh my God. No, not at all. I mean, here's the thing that you don't understand, Brendan. As a rational Jew, I can tell you that you can put Parmesan cheese shavings on Brussels sprouts and they won't be good. Just like you can't put Parmesan cheese shavings on the Holocaust and that won't be good. They're both bad.
Right.
One's not going to cover up. You can't cover up the Holocaust with Parmesan cheese shavings, nor can you cover up things that you don't like about Brussels sprouts with those. So,
to Brendan's point too, the way she reacts so quickly when, do you understand why it's offensive? Do you understand why it's so hard to wear a mask? Like she is a reactionary in every single sense of the word. She has no ability to comprehend those statements as presented to her until she can do a whataboutism, because like everything is filtered through the lens of her own kind of deranged aggrievement.
I love that rational Jews would also understand HIPAA rights of those who don't want to wear masks. Rational Jews from the Holocaust survivors.
Yeah, pretty sure that that there is no HIPAA violation when everyone's supposed to wear a mask in the house. Is that not correct? Because then it's literally protecting all those anti-vaxxers.
there's never been any type of requirement to show that you've had a vaccine ever. And therefore, it is a violation of HIPAA because there's no context ever where you need to show that you've been vaccinated in any circumstance. Here is, that's just unbelievable. Speaking of vaccination, here's Rand Paul just basically coming out and saying like, he doesn't need to be vaxxed because he has natural immunity. And how does he know this? Because he is an optometrist or an ophthalmologist certified by a completely made up ophthalmology organization. Here he is.
Hospitalized or getting very sick, I've just made my own personal decision that I'm not getting vaccinated because I've already had the disease and I have natural immunity now. But that should be my, in a free country, you would think people would honor, the idea that each individual would get to make their medical decisions, that it wouldn't be Big Brother coming in and telling me, what I have to do. Are they going to also tell me I can't have a cheeseburger for lunch?
They may not say that you can't have a cheeseburger for lunch, but they may say, we don't allow food into this establishment. So in other words, please leave your cheeseburger outside.
Or this establishment can no longer perform abortions.
Yeah. Why isn't he out there talking about like the no shoes, no shirt, no service signs? Like, why is my personal freedom to take my shirt off, take my shoes and my socks off, go into the deli, get some food, and walk out with it? Why am my personal freedom is being so infringed upon? This is a human body. If God meant there to be clothes on it, I would have been born with clothes on. I wasn't. I was born naked. And that's the way I like to go and order a sandwich.
When did Rand Paul have COVID? It's more than 6 months ago. Gotta be.
I mean,
we don't even know when the immunity ends.
I don't even know what. No, we don't. We don't know what his antibodies are. We don't know whether he has them or how much.
We don't even know if he's lying.
Why does he even say that? Like, what difference does that make? Are you going to prove that you have antibodies? Are you going to prove that you're not contagious? I mean, this is just, these people are lunatics. I want people just to sit back and realize like what it has come to with these people. They're so angry that they bungled the response to the pandemic, that they're gonna refuse to get vaccinated.
They're so angry that that the pandemic has forced a conversation nationally about your own personal actions and choices affecting those around you. Right? I mean, that's what the whole vaccination conversation is about, that we all essentially have a national duty to get us over this hump. And the people that aren't getting vaccinated, it's not because they don't have access. There are definitely, but people like Rand Paul in his ideology They are resentful that they have to be a part of a collective movement to improve the health of the country, or that they feel that they have to be. That's what this boils down to. It's childish. It's like essentially a 7-year-old, just as his mom says, don't reach your hand into the cookie jar, doing it, right? It's a way to lash out when you're being told to do, not to do something. That's what it is.
It is the collectivism that they're also concerned about. It really is. As it stands now, there is UN aid getting into Gaza. The one testing site in Gaza for 2 million people are COVID, destroyed by bombing. The vaccination rate in Gaza, 2%. There are reports of an attempt by, or there are reports, nothing confirmed at this point, that the Israeli government is beginning to start to round up Palestinians with Israeli citizenship in Israel proper, that basically the assault on the Palestinians is just continuing in a different manner, this time within Israel. Here is Robert Gates running interference. This is, he was Obama's Secretary of Defense, I believe. It was Bush's as well. Here he is on with John Dickerson. You know what the problem here, folks, is? The problem is that the Palestinians just won't take yes for an answer. I just want to be clear. When you look back to the what was ostensibly offered them back at the end of the century, the last century, and you'll hear the talking points. They were offered 98% of the West Bank. I just want to remind you that, like, if you make a deal with someone about your house, let's say you're going through a divorce, I'm going to give you 98% of the house. The only thing I want to keep is the sink in the kitchen, the oven in the kitchen, the dishwasher and the refrigerator and the bathroom. Those are all I'm taking. You can have the rest of the house. The point is that house is not going to function. You are not going to be able to function in that house because you're not having access to water or facilities that you need that are crucial for the infrastructure of the house. That is what that offer was. But here is Robert Gates telling us that the real problem is that the Palestinians are just not grateful enough.
Is it consistent with U.S. national interests and values to leave the Palestinians out in the cold?
I certainly don't think it's consistent with our values. But, John, the truth is almost every president has made a real effort. And so these efforts have been stymied time and time again. And I would say there have been Israeli prime ministers who were actually interested in a solution, but the Palestinians couldn't bring themselves to say yes.
How do you grade President Biden's handling of the issue?
I think that the U.S. not being front and center was probably not a bad thing. I think letting the Egyptians, others take the lead. The loudest voices for a ceasefire were coming from Europe and from the United States, not from the Arab states, although Egypt certainly played a role in negotiating the ceasefire.
You mentioned President Biden was not publicly saying a number of things, not putting public pressure on the Israelis.
I think sometimes the United States can achieve its objectives more effectively by playing a behind-the-scenes role than by being out in front. When the United States is out in front, it automatically creates lots of antibodies in a lot of different places. But if the U.S. is playing a constructive role behind the scenes, often it can be much more effective.
The idea that the Palestinians just couldn't say yes is, I mean, part of the reason why the United States can't play an effective role out in front, because they have not been an honest broker over the past 20 years. And I love the idea that when Israel is bombing the Palestinians, they are bombing Hamas. But when Israel can't get to yes, it's the Palestinians who say no. I mean, just people should just watch this. When people are dying, there are no Palestinians. There's only Hamas. But when anybody is exercising any type of, they're not going with the program or anything like that, it's the Palestinians.
Mm-hmm.
That's the way this works. That's the way that, I mean, that's just, it's subtle stuff, but it's just like, it is a way of denying sort of the humanity of Palestinians.
How about the other subtle stuff there, or not so subtle stuff about how the United States called for a ceasefire? He leaves out that they repeatedly blocked the United Nations resolution for a ceasefire until Biden was finally like, okay, maybe, behind the scenes. Yep. But the Arab states, you hear him say that?
Yep.
The Arab states didn't call. So, because don't you guys get it? The Arab states, including the Palestinians and Hamas, you know, all they know is violence. That's like the implicit undercurrent in this conversation. And I mean, it's like the fact that there are people on the left in this country now that are beginning to see this as a systemic racism, colonialism issue. It's helpful because then you can see that kind of garbage for what it is. And that's what that was.
Let's go to the phones. Calling from a 702 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hey, Sam, it's Bro Flamingo from Las Vegas.
Bro Flamingo from Las Vegas. How are you, Bro Flamingo?
I'm all right. I'm doing pretty well. What's going on, Emma?
Oh, did you say Emma? How are you, Bro Flamingo?
Yeah. No, I'm all right.
You got to get you make sure you got your phone up in front of your face. Go ahead.
Gotcha. I was going to say, Sam, you know, I remember being a teenager back in the early aughts, and this kind of goes to the Palestinian-Israeli conflict right now. I mean, what's going on is disgusting. But the way you guys have been talking about, and what I also observed about how kind of the discourse is shifting, and, you know, they can't come out with these talking points for free. And Sam, how much of a function of that is kind of like the reason why I brought up the early 2000s, because that's when I felt like the evangelicals in the popular mainstream culture and politics were at their peak power, but now they've been on the decline. And, you know, outside of like lunatic Republican circles, they don't really have that much cultural cachet or political cachet outside the Republican Party. How much is that a function of, you know, the shift in the discourse and the talking points? Because I feel like a lot of that was kind of solidified in the popular discourse just because of, like, you know, Paul Wolfowitz, Bush, and all those guys just kind of taking the reins of power. And, you know, we saw Cheney. You guys are talking about Cheney today. I mean, she was a part of that too. All those nut jobs or whatever. Everybody wants to boost him, burn her, but she's trash too. But I kind of feel like, you know, that discourse is definitely, you know, I'm sorry.
All right. I disagree with the premise that they have less power now. I think they're not as visible in the culture, in the mainstream culture, as they used to be. George Bush was born again. You had figures like Pat Robertson and Jerry Falwell, who are sort of more prominent figures. You've since had like folks like, you know, was it Hagee? And there was one or two also that sort of like fell from grace, essentially. But I think they also have their own media outlets now and no longer need to sort of traverse into mainstream media. And they're just as successful and just as powerful.
Wait, let me say this though, because that's a good point. Maybe a diminishing of power is the wrong word, But I feel like, Sam, on some level, because like I remember Ann Nelson talked about this in Shadow Network. That was a really good book. I remember when you had her on. But Sam, let me ask you a question though. Do you think the function that because of the media fragmentation, if they have their own ecosystem, that particular issue, that particular thing that they're really focusing on isn't poisoning, I should say, the quote unquote mainstream discourse, however you want to parse that out? Because I feel like a function of that was evangelical base.
I think that's probably part of it, but I really do think that what we're seeing is, I think if I had to sort of, say what it's more of a function of, I think the absence of those voices in the mainstream probably help a little bit, but I think part of it is generational. I think part of it is also a heightened awareness in this country of the dynamic that Emma was talking about, how racism plays into this. I think part of it is a function of more awareness of Bibi Netanyahu, and just like and I think part of it is, frankly, is just like the at least in terms of like Jewish circles, I keep making this point. I think it's generational because we are further out from the Holocaust. We are further out from the founding of Israel and the sort of like the myths that grew up around Israel in the wake of like the 67 war and the Yom Kippur War, and the dynamic of Israel being, a small country that was surrounded by enemies, and the notion that there was an existential threat to Israel. Well, people don't buy the existential threat to Israel anymore. I'm sorry, they don't. And
yes, I agree.
And with good reason, because there's no evidence of it. I mean, it's conceivable that Iran could launch a nuclear weapon to Israel, and then Israel would, but except for the fact they don't have one, except for the fact that like Israel's the only one who has one. And so I think all those things combine to change the narrative.
Also, saying just two quick things, and I'll jump. Also, I think a function of that too, that we're also further out from 9/11 as well.
Yep.
I think 9/11.
Yes.
Last Sam, how much? And you can answer this question after I jump. How much of a function of this hand wringing about Liz Cheney or whatever? Because I kind of feel like saying this is like a media busy box on some level, and a branding exercise, like Emma pointed out. It is a branding exercise. But I feel like, the conservatives I talk to, also people on the left, because I'm in DSA here or whatever, but like nobody cares about this. So how much is this like a kind of a beltway media type of thing? Because like at the end of the day, everybody knows that the juice at this point, by the way, is with MAGA. I think the longer term implications of that, Sam, I don't think Donald Trump has the juice like that further out. The longer we go out to like 2022 and 2024, I don't think the MAGA, at least Donald Trump as a function of juicing the party, I think that's going to be diminished. But how much of a function of like, I'm anti-Trump, so that's going to boost me in the future? How much do you think that's going to do anything for Liz Cheney or any of those types? Because I just feel like this is like a media busy box because it's Liz Cheney. Anyways, guys,
I appreciate the call. I think that her being anti-Trump is going to do nothing for her. And if I had to bet, if she wants to still be in politics in 3 years from now, she's never talking about that stuff. I mean, you just see it right here, the pivot already with the move with the anti-voting laws that we talked about that up the top of the beginning of the show. She's just going to subscribe to every single thing that they're pushing, and hope that to the extent that there's any chance that she can ascend in the Republican Party, that those anti-Trumpers have some authority. That's it. I mean, that's it. She's not going anywhere, except for maybe like, Sunday talk shows for a long time. but she was going to be on there anyways. All right. Final call of the day. Calling from a 401 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hello. This is Michael from Chicago.
Michael from Chicago. What's on your mind, Michael? You're the final caller of the day.
Awesome. I'm calling about a caller from a couple Wednesdays back who, to say it nicely, was struggling with racial pride issues. And you guys brought up the points on why they were wrong. But I wanted to give a message to white people, including myself, like a advice on how to deal with pride. And the first part is like the phrases like Black pride are a much needed counter to the societal structure that pressures Black people to feel ashamed, specifically for their skin color. Saying Black pride is, in our context, a way of saying don't devalue or shame me for my skin. Whereas white people like me haven't had a negative systemic treatment, so we don't need to defend our human value on this issue. But for us, it's about finding pride in one's recent ancestry, if you know it, like the arts and sports. So for me, Scotland, contributions like bagpipes, log throwing, guinea stone lifting, kilts. I love that stuff and I take pride in it. But if you don't know your ancestry, then you can go into your local sports or your own personal achievements, your own skill set. And so I just wanted to say, like, those are immutable, or those are non-immutable things that you can take pride in, like your personal skill set. And so if like you're worried about Black pride, white pride, Puerto Rican pride, or whatever, it's like, no, you don't need to deal with that issue unless you're being treated badly systemically.
It's well said.
Very good advice, I think.
Good advice.
Yeah, cool.
Well said. Appreciate it.
I guess before I go, I want to say, Emma, there was during when you had some reporting that really was amazing to me, or when you were back in Rebel HQ, and Bernie had just dropped out of the 2020 election.
Right.
And everybody was able to report on the details, but the way you conveyed the message, it was catharsis for me, because I felt like heart-wrenched and just like crying, and like the way you deliver the message, I was like, you get it, like there's another person feeling exactly the same way as me. And so, thank you for all your great reporting over the years.
I really appreciate that. Thank you. Good to know, my own crying on camera was cathartic for people, because I don't like when that happens.
Yeah.
But I got the crying bug all the time. So I cry at commercials. It's a problem. All right.
Awesome. All right. Bye.
Thanks for the call.
Thank you.
All right. That's it for our caller portion of the day, folks. We will say goodbye now to our callers. And I'm going to read a couple of IMs. And Aaron is not cool. Sam, you mentioned dropping into the Discord on a night to hang out. Is that still the plan? Yes. I just got to figure it out. I'm got a lot of loose ends. I'm working out. Hopefully, too, when I'm done with practice and games for baseball. May have been a little bit overextension on my part, but it's the only way I get Saul to play right now, and hopefully he will get more attached to the thing. The only thing that he loves doing that he doesn't need any encouragement from me, skateboarding.
Yeah,
dude loves to skateboard. Loves to skateboard. He's very good at it.
That's cool.
All right, I'm going to read 6 of these, and then we're going to get out of here. Panda. I live in rural Colorado, and I'm part of our community's racial equity movement. It is amazing. The opposition considers any equity talk as an attack on capitalism and calls us Marxists. I think they're making the ultimate point without realizing it. Yes, but I also think that when people have to understand, if you're not a socialist or even familiar with what socialists are or what socialism is, when the right deploys the word socialist, if you were to ask the audience who they are targeting, what are 5 things that you associate with socialism? I guarantee you Barack Obama will be on that list, and maybe the Black Panthers, right? I mean, it is so coded for them.
Maybe AOC at this point.
Yeah, but I think it comes from Obama. I think it's like they tried to turn the word socialism into the word that means like black people are coming for you for your stuff.
Yeah, well, they were successful, unfortunately.
Chanderson 96, Sam, I live in Texas. Please adopt me so I can move to New York City. Shit's getting crazy out here. But what kind of stuff would you do around the house? That's why you get children, right? It's just to get like chores done. The other Biden, confused by Emma's skepticism of Sam's pitching. The goal of a T-ball pitcher is to make it easy for the hitters to hit. The pitcher only pitches to the players on his team, not to the other team.
Well, I mean, part of it's just fun. But part of it is, maybe Sam's juicing Saul's numbers a little bit.
So you're saying I would sacrifice the success of my team just so that my son could do well on a losing team?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Sam, nameless cat. You all had a caller who claimed that Majority Report hats were too small, and you argued that the hats are adjustable. We in the large-headed community know that, but the problem is the hats aren't deep enough to properly adorn our large-brain containers. And here I thought the left was supposed to be inclusive. What about us with larger heads? All right, we got to look into that, Brendan. Chowder with Crowder. All the great Gen Xers dead from shooting heroin. All we have left is Sam and his pals strung out on feline insulin. There you go. Dude guy pal, I'm begging you, Sam, please stop taking calls from Mike in Miami. Oh, I don't think that'll happen. Kevin from Philadelphia, Emma, the Sixers are winning it all this year?
No, I still think the Nets will, and I hate it. But I'm rooting for the Suns, I think. I want Chris Paul to get a ring.
Mark Monkey, hey, crew, can confirm that Rand Paul is not immune to COVID. In my research on my Twitch stream, I found that at most, and in rare cases, the antibodies protect you for 6 months. And if the virus is the wild type and not the other virus, the variants knock through antibodies like Rand's neighbor knocked him off his lawnmower.
Nice.
Yeah, I like it. And what the final IM of the day? Jersey Max. What's the deal with the news about the Wuhan lab? I'm nervous. I sounded like an idiot shutting down a lot of conspiracy theorists. I don't think that there's any evidence yet that it came from the Wuhan lab, and there certainly wasn't any evidence before. But there isn't. It's not a dispositive. The evidence that exists is not dispositive. It's possible.
Yeah, it's always been a hypothesis they are entertaining, but they have not found evidence for it yet.
So this all started with the Nicholas Baker feature in New York Magazine in January. And he very clearly from the beginning says that this is just a hypothesis that is not provable, but, should be asked in terms of how the funding that goes around, the oversight and all of that. And he wrote a book about, funding biological weapons research in America after 9/11. So check that out if you're interested.
Good stuff. Maybe we should have him on.
I'm down.
All right, folks, the actual real final IM of the day. I understand the caller's concerns about free college, but I highly doubt free college means everyone all of a sudden wants to learn underwater basket weaving or study obscure French literature. I still think plenty of people want to be teachers, doctors, and scientists, etc. Indeed. Underwater basket weaving, not as fun as you would think. All right, folks, Emma, Matt, Brendan, great job today. See you tomorrow.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the light bulb, but finding out won't make me feel any better. Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the meds are gonna kick in.